designer.
I'm Nicholas Chow, and I was an environmental artist.
And I'm Sarah Lewiski. I was a character texture and lighting lesson project.
So we're here to talk about InStitches, and what is it? It's an FPS, or first-person sewer, where we take control of Eloise. She's a young doll girl armed with a gigantic needle and half a scissor. Her town has been overrun by this mysterious creatures called the Stitchlings, which we'll see later on. So in this patchwork world, we wanted to let the player interact with the environment in different ways. That's why Eloise, with her needle, can throw it at certain objects like this beanbag right here, and overcome this obstacle. She can also throw her needle against enemies, and this stitches down the enemies, essentially rendering them immobile and furthering their use, which we'll cover later too. But now, to talk about the world, here's Sarah.
So, as Antonio mentioned, our world is made entirely out of cloth. We drew from inspirations like Little Big Planet, Coraline, Nightmare Before Christmas, and my own real-world experiences making quilts and costumes. Initially, choosing first person was just a way to immerse a player, but it quickly became a way for us to focus on the world rather than a character. By weaving together both our mechanics and our inspirations, we came up with a visual style that was a little bit more cute horror than whimsical imagination. As you'll be able to see soon coming up, we kind of paid homage to one of our inspirations, Coraline. We recreated one of the scenes where Coraline goes to the garden of the other mother, and we wanted to do that just to bring through some of our inspirations. And now, to talk about more of the mechanics, is Rory.
Thank you, Sarah. So, in Stitches, we let our inspiration bleed into not just the world, but also into our enemies. So each of our enemies has a name. One is Lydia, one is Jack, and Klaus is the final enemy. So Klaus is the only killable one because his name does not come up in any of our inspirational movies. So when dealing with Klaus, he's a very simple enemy, but his secondary function is to drop health once he is stitched down, as Antonio has done here. And the little button he drops is the player's health. And the next challenge that we present to the player is taking on two Klauses at the same time. They pose not much of a threat, but enough of one that maybe an inexperienced player would have troubles with. On to the next level, we have Lydia. Lydia is our yarn ball spitting enemy that spits burning yarn balls. Stitching her down will allow the player to use her as a turret. She can be used to take out breakable walls or to kill Klaus. I'll discuss the third enemy in the next level, but to discuss about our designs and level design challenges, here's Alex.
Thanks, Rory. As you can see here, we introduced Lydia in a very controlled environment. The player has nothing else to worry about, so the only thing the player has to do is just get used to Lydia. What her AI patterns are, and just kind of have fun shooting burning balls of yarn everywhere. Once the player feels comfortable using her as a tool, they can go ahead and break the wall, which frees two Klauses. These little guys serve two purposes. The first is to reinforce the mechanic from the last level, and the second is to increase the intensity for the player. After the Klauses are dispatched, they move on to the final challenge in the level, which is to position a beanbag on a pressure plate, opening a door, leading them into the next area. We follow this pattern in every level, and this careful application of mechanics and enemies allows us to tightly control the difficulty curve throughout the experience. Now, to introduce our third and final enemy, we're back to Rory.
Thank you, Alex. So Jack, our third and final enemy here, is a big, lumbering, something like Pooh, but just a charging enemy that will corral the player into walls, corners, and lock them in and just bash his face into yours and make it very difficult to get around him. So, to use him as a tool, we stitch him down and use him to traverse up through our environments when a beanbag or the jump is just too high for the player. So, going back to what Alex was saying about reintroducing our old mechanics, we brought back Lydia here. Now to talk about knitting the world together and giving it some life, here's Nick.
Thank you, Rory. Through the designs of the environment, we really wanted to let the player traverse through this town-like area surrounded by forest. Through our inspirations, we created this atmosphere that was inviting, yet creepy, and at the same time really keeping the flow and cuteness within our game. Our primary goal was to create a very immersive experience for the player. In doing so, most of our props were created without rough edges and